Hi, if you're a regular viewer and you're watching this, you might be wondering what's going on. This has nothing to do with archery, and you are absolutely correct. But if there's one thing that I enjoy talking about more than archery, it's teaching, because teaching is my day job. That shouldn't be surprising for most people. I think many of you already know this, either because I've said it somewhere before, I look like one, sound like one, or the fact that it's kind of my channel name. That said, despite the fact that being a teacher is one of the three things I normally plug myself as in social media, I don't think I've really spoken about that, and that's a bit of a shame because that's the one thing I will keep on talking about. I've been teaching for 10 years now, and I think I've gathered a bit of experience and grey hairs along the way to speak about things which I've come across and share my experience to you as the viewer, as the future teacher perhaps. And the reason why I'm making this video is that I've come across a very interesting trend. It's a tag challenge from Megan from Too Cool for School, and that is the topic of how I became a teacher. So using this opportunity, I thought it'd be a great chance to introduce to many of you my background as an educator, and perhaps thinking about for those of you watching this who want to become educators or who appreciate teachers and educators, a bit of insight as to where I come from and perhaps know a bit more about me. Question one, did you always know you wanted to be a teacher? And if not, what was the point at which you decided to become a teacher? I'm not one of those people who dreamed of being a teacher from a young age. My original passion and what I wanted to do as a career was to be a writer. I was a very avid reader. I loved reading novels of every kind. I was one of those big bookworms who read every book in the library. I was especially drawn to fantasy books like The Lord of the Rings, especially The Lord of the Rings. And I was also drawn to the Tom Clancy novels and realistic war and military novels as well. So I was a bit of a military nerd or buff. So I kind of envisioned myself becoming a writer, and that was perhaps one of the skills I particularly wanted to harness when I went through school. Now, realistically, that was something I might have thought about doing long term when I was an adult. So I would have a career first, then do writing on the side, as many writers tend to do. Now, the career path that I was being groomed for was engineering. I come from a typical Asian family. The stereotype is true. My father wanted me to become a programmer or software engineer, so something with IT. So all my studies in school were based around doing IT. So I did information technology, several subjects. I studied math and science, and I did, I think, Japanese on the side as well. So it was mostly science, math as my background. One of the factors which changed, and this is my teacher origin story, which I love sharing because it's such a bizarre story, is that I did an accelerated university subject in year 12. So in my final year of high school, I did a unit of university education for a Bachelor of Computing. So it was kind of a first step towards university degree in my high school year. And I was not that good at it. I was like the A+ student back in school, so to not do as confidently, I wasn't that bad, but I wasn't as confident. It was a bit of a shake-up for me, and I actually remember the turning point. There are actually three moments in my transition to be a teacher. The first turning point was I was in year 12, I was 17, and I went to my first university exam, and that was in mid-year. And for a 17-year-old who was doing long distance education at university, it was the first time I'd ever come across a university environment. And most of you know, like, college exams or uni exams are very stressful, and a lot of people are like zoned out like zombies. And I went on a train to the venue, and there were like thousands of like these half-dead people just walking towards the venue and sitting down these endless rows of tables. And I remember very clearly that it was an exam. We used Visual Basic as a coding program back then, and we were allowed our textbook, and there were a lot of theory questions and coding questions. Now, the part which shocked me was that I I sucked at this exam. Like, I was already struggling with the subject. I started strong, but when it came to coding, I started to struggle quite a bit, and I just couldn't figure things out. I couldn't think like a programmer. So I was really struggling. And as someone who never failed an exam, someone who always held high standards, the A student, I was actually sitting there petrified as a 17-year-old, actually counting marks and wondering if I'd actually passed. I was that scared that I was going to fail this exam and fail the subject. I know a lot of you might have gone through a similar experience, but for me, that has never happened before. It just freaked me out. One of the questions, I do remember that the paper was pink for some reason, but one of the questions was to write an entire program by hand. So you had no coding, no computer, you had your coding book or your textbook, and you had to handwrite the code for this program. And I knew mine didn't work. I just couldn't plug it together. But whatever happened, I actually did quite well. I got a distinction overall for the subject, which means I averaged 70% plus, I think. And that was like, wow, I really dodged a bullet there. So I passed quite well, but it also really traumatized me because I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like being not confident in this subject, and that was my first step in the origin story. The second moment of revelation was I was doing a physics prac report, and I was at home typing up, and I had my physics resources on one side, and on the other side I had a whole bunch of history textbooks. These were books which my dad collected. I still got them around here, and I looked at one side and I thought, hang on, why am I doing this set of science and physics books as a study and I'm reading this for fun? Why can't I do this as a job? So I was already passionate about history. I loved history, one of my best subjects. I didn't study it in my senior years, but that was there. So it was kind of nagging me, wondering why am I doing IT and science and maths and not arts and history? The third turning point was a revision lecture at Victoria University. It was for physics, preparing for our exams. And one of the lecturers who was giving us the material, they asked, do you have any questions? And the whole lecture hall was quiet. So he said as a joke, you're so good, you should all become teachers. And I'm like, so that came together. That was the origin story of how I came around to recognize my calling as a teacher. And I think it's very important to recognize this as a calling. It's not so much a career choice as it is a calling. I really felt that this is what I wanted to do. And when I told my father, he wanted me to become an engineer, said, so how's your programming coming along? And I said, well, I don't want to be a programmer. He just blew up. He went, what? Asian parent, right? And he said, well, what do you want to be then? And I said, I want to be a teacher. And I was expecting this full-on argument, because Asian parents that don't really accept this idea of not being an engineer, or not being a doctor or a lawyer. And it didn't come. I just said, oh, okay, that's cool. And like, wait, aren't you supposed to argue? Aren't you supposed to oppose me and say you're ashamed of your family? And say, no, that's fine, because, well, turns out my entire family are teachers. My father was a teacher and a principal. My mother worked in the kindergarten. My aunts and uncles were the university lecturers. So it's in our blood apparently, and it just made complete sense. So there was all this stress in my final year for nothing. I was bound to be a teacher. Question 2, what was your major in college? My major was English, though I kind of regret doing that. I think the formal study of English kind of killed my passion for it. So these days I identify more as a history teacher more than an English teacher. Question 3, what requirements does your state have for teachers? Just a brief overview for at least the state of Victoria in Australia. You need to have a teaching certification, of course. So in most cases, that's going to be either a graduate diploma of education. So you do a bachelor's course in science or arts and so on, and then you do a grad dip or a dip ed. Or it could be a bachelor's degree, so Bachelor of Education, or it might be a master's degree, like like a master of teaching, depending on which model university uses. But you need to be accredited as a teacher through a formal study at university. Within this study, you will need to have, I think, at least 50 days of practicum. I'm not sure the exact number or how it's changed, but you do need to have teaching placements in your final year. Now, I know I've heard from American teachers where it's a whole like 1 year internship. We don't really do it here. You study at university primarily, but you do have a portion of your course done in school. So you do teach for several weeks at a time, and that's when you get your on-the-job training, I guess. So you need to do a certain number of days of training. You need to have at least 2 methods, and a method is a subject area like history, English, maths, science, language, and so on. And these methods are what you are qualified to teach. And just for those who aren't teachers, the reason why methods are important and are used to identify teachers is because it's not just about the content you teach, but the methodology or the technique behind it. An example is if you are good at maths, like you know differentiation or you can do calculus, it doesn't mean you have the method to teach it to other people. So that's why methods are important. You might know stuff, but knowing how to teach it is different. So my methods were English and humanities, and that's actually what I do teach. I am also a language teacher, but I'm not trained to do so. So that's something you can get away with in schools once you get in the system. Schools might reallocate you to different classes or subjects which you wouldn't be qualified to teach, but they might need you because you might be the best person for it. And that happened to me. So once you have your degree, you have your methods, you've done your teaching placements, you need to be registered with the Victorian Institute of Teaching, or the VIT, which is the governing body for teachers in Victoria. And to maintain that, you need to do a certain number of days of teaching, as well as maintain a certain number of hours of professional development, which is additional training during your teaching career, and that's renewed every year. Question 4, how did you decide which age group to teach? I made it very clear from the beginning that I was going to be a secondary teacher. I have worked in primary schools, and that's a whole lot of fun, and it's a very creative environment to go back to, but I thought that my skill set was more beneficial for the adolescents, the ones growing up as teenagers, especially because I connected more to that particular age group in terms of my experience and background, and that's why I felt I was going to be the most useful with my particular approach to teaching. I felt that if I was a primary teacher, I wouldn't be very well suited for it, so yeah, I just get along better with the teenagers. Question 5, did you do any substitute teaching? No, I went straight from university to being a full-time teacher. Question 6, what was the process like to apply for your first teaching position? So teaching positions here are done online mostly. So there's Recruitment Online, which is the government system. There's also one for Catholic schools and one for independent schools. So the position is advertised online. The school requests which kind of teacher, so it might be graduate, full-time, part-time, and which methods they need. And again, this has become back to the methods, whether they need an English teacher or humanities teacher or a science teacher, and normally a position will require 2 methods. You can apply for just one and you might get away with it, or the school might rearrange their staffing to cater for the different qualifications, or you might have to teach the additional method if you prove you're good enough and you're a good fit. And often the methods are paired, so you have English and humanities or science and maths because they're similar fields, but you will have some anomalies, like you might have PE maths, for example. And so you might see some teachers in your schools have strange combinations, like you have a PE teacher which also teaches maths. It's because we have 2 methods and we need to apply both of them in schools. So when you have the job advertisement, you apply for it, you attach your CV, and you must also write up key selection criteria. And these are a set of 5 dot points which you must respond to in detail, like at least a page each, if not more, basically justifying how you fit into this criteria. And the criteria might include things like the school culture, dealing with parents and colleagues, professional development, your teaching methodology, and so on. So this is probably the most stressful part, is writing a damn good selection criteria, and that's how people interview you. If it's anywhere near faulty or flawed, if there's some spelling mistake anywhere, they normally disregard you. I've been on the back end of the application process, and I've had, like, our positions are so scarce that you can have 200 applicants for one job, and if there's any hint that something's not quite right, then they just chuck you out. So it's really hard, and you must be perfect in your approach and your application. So once that happens, they interview you, and if you're a good fit, then you're basically recruited, and then you're basically inducted into the school. That's for me starting at the beginning of the school year. Some people go halfway through and it's a bit more awkward, but I was one of those clean slates where I went straight from university, got the job, and then went through to teaching in the first start of the year. It was interesting, by the way, that my job interview happened on my birthday. I got the phone call to come in the morning. I had to interview in the afternoon and the job in the evening. Question 7, were there common interview questions which I remember? It's normal the stuff you hear every teacher say. They're mostly scenario questions. What would you do if? So what is your policy for classroom management? What if someone had an issue in class and you had to deal with it, and that sort of thing. But the questions I actually remember the most was an interesting one. In my selection criteria, I wrote some really great one-liners, and one of the criteria is about the school culture and environment. And what I said was, I believe that I can be a bridge for cultures and generations. That was absolutely poetic and beautiful, and I was hoping they would talk about that, and they didn't. They highlighted something else I said about ICT, or information technology, and what I said was, IT or ICT should not just be seen as a solution, it's a tool, and we have to understand how to use these tools. And because the school at the time was going through a big reorganization in terms of ICT and getting more staff trained up for computers and technology, that was what stuck out to them. And I actually became known as the IT guy. I look like one, I guess. So my open capacity to use technology and tools was something which was an asset and something which stuck with me for most of my career. So that's the question, like, what did you mean by this? How would you use technology? What were the problems? I remember talking about how, like, we can't just adopt things and just use it as an instant solution. Things take time, not every tool is useful, and we have to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the tools that we use, whether it's computers, laptops, online apps. We can't just rely on one thing, we have to be flexible and adapt to it. So that's kind of my approach to IT, and it still is today. One of the issues which is ongoing is upskilling staff, and often we get these really trendy apps which we might not end up using, and it can be a waste of resources, a waste of time, and might conflict with other ongoing programs and apps. So you've got to be smart about IT. It's not a solution. It is a solution, but it isn't like the fix everything solution. So yeah, that was what I said in my interview, and that scored big points, so it worked. Question 8, what was the first teaching position that you were hired for? It's my current one. I only applied for one position, well, 2 technically, but I took one seriously. That was this one. So yeah, my first and only position, which I've held for over 10 years now, is English Humanities teacher at my school. We don't pick year levels, by the way. We put in preferences, but we get allocated what grades to teach, so we didn't really pick that. It tends to be quite nomadic in our system. We don't have a class to ourselves. We really move around, they move around, so it's quite impersonal at times, but that's how it works, yeah. Question number 9, what did you feel prepared for on your first day of school? What did you feel unprepared for? Yeah, the first few years of your career is going to be about survival, like get past the first day, the first week, the first term. For me, it was originally not knowing the content, and this might seem a bit contradictory, but bear with me, right? As a history teacher, you teach every history. Doesn't matter what you specialize in. I specialize in World War II, Vietnam, medieval, and did a bit of American Civil War. But like, you teach everything from ancient China to ancient Egypt to the Vikings to indigenous Australian history. So you have to be up to scratch, and often you learn for the first time what you were teaching like the day before you teach it. So especially for subject areas like history where you can't predict what you were teaching, then you have to upskill very quickly. And especially if you change your year level and your subject every year, then you have to catch up with all this history. Once you've taught it for a few years, you become familiar with the topic, and therefore you can teach it without too much preparation. But your first time teaching this subject is brand new. Same with English, you need to be familiar with the text, the novels you teach. If you've never taught it before, then you have to read it first, and then like you have to read before the kids do, or while the kids are reading. So yeah, like not knowing the content confidently was one of the first shocks. I know for some people with like classroom management, but I felt that I got along with students fairly naturally in my early career. I think identifying as a teacher mentally was a really hard thing to do initially. It took a bit of age and maturity, and I'd say around 3 years before I felt comfortable being a teacher, when I figured out what I was doing, and about 5 years before I was pretty much coasting and I felt confident that I was going to be a teacher for life. So that was the first thing that got to me on my first day, on my first week of school, was getting my head around being a teacher. And question 10, what advice would I give to people who want to be teachers? I'm going to do this in 2 ways. Firstly, for the people who are thinking of being a teacher, and the people who are already on the way to being a teacher or are teachers. So the first one is, be the teacher you wish you had as a kid. There may be someone in your life who inspired you to be a teacher. There wasn't one in my life. I'm saying my teachers were bad, they were actually really good teachers, but there were teachers from a different generation and different background. And as a first generation or immigrant, or second generation immigrant rather, I wanted to connect with people in the same situation as me. And like I said, be that bridge between cultures and generations. And I didn't have a teacher who was like me, who did what I did, enjoyed what I enjoyed, who geeked out on what I love to geek out on. So I wanted to be that kind of teacher. That was one of my ongoing goals, is to be that teacher you could connect to. And for most of the children, the students I work with in my current school, it's almost a perfect match. After all, they've got a teacher who's also a YouTuber who shoots things, so that's awesome. So that's kind of wanted to be. And whatever you do, be the teacher that which you would have liked to have when you were in school. For the teachers or the people who are teaching now or nearly teaching now, my big advice is don't work alone. Teaching can be quite isolating. You're in a room by yourself with a bunch of kids. Sometimes you can't find anyone in your life to talk to. Like, your family might understand what you're going through, your friends might not be teachers, and everyone thinks they know the career. Like, everyone has seen a teacher and been in the school, but they don't understand what the issues actually are, and they'll just make generalizations and you'll be fine, that sort of thing. So it can be very hard to find support. So definitely make use of your colleagues. Use their support networks. If you're having trouble with a class or a student, or you're having trouble teaching a subject, turn around and talk to the nearest teacher. Teachers are very collegiate, they're very open about sharing resources and tips. I've never met a teacher who wanted to secrete things away. I normally share all my resources from the last 10 years to whichever teacher I have as a pre-service teacher, just because I want to give you a shortcut. I want to help you. Like, don't go through the hard things I went through. You will go through your own challenges in your career, but don't do things that you don't have to do. Don't reinvent the wheel, use what's already there, but also keep that spark of creativity that keeps you going as a teacher. Anyway, that's my spiel on how I became a teacher. Hopefully that was somewhat interesting to you, and if you've just joined me for the first time and you're wondering how I became a teacher, then hopefully this gives you some insight to what's going on behind my head. This is, after all, what I do for most of my life, which I actually want to talk more about on my channel. So if you have any additional ideas, then I'm actually very happy to branch out and cover this really big part of my life, which I'll probably talk more about than the things I currently talk about. So any ideas or questions, queries, concerns, controversies, issues, post below. I'm very happy to provide my insight and what I can do and from what I've experienced. But apart from that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, do check out the playlist of the teacher tag below. Anyway, this is NUSensei. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.